The telegram arrived on a Tuesday morning in March of 1876, and when Dalton Pierce opened it with hands still rough from morning chores, he wondered if he had made the biggest mistake of his life. The words were simple, direct, lacking any warmth. Arriving Clifton Hill, Arizona, March 28. Valerie Brooks. 3 weeks he had been waiting since sending his own telegram, accepting her response to his advertisement. 3 weeks of wondering what kind of woman answers an advertisement for a mail-order bride, what kind of desperation drives a person to travel across the country to marry a stranger. Then again, what kind of loneliness drives a man to place such an advertisement in the first place? Dalton folded the telegram carefully and tucked it into his shirt pocket. His ranch house, modest but sturdy, sat on 200 acres of decent grazing land just outside Clifton Hill. The house had 3 bedrooms, a kitchen, a sitting room, and a front porch that caught the evening breeze. He had built it himself over the course of 2 years, imagining someday filling it with a family. That was before Sarah died of fever, before he realized that most women in town were already spoken for or had no interest in a quiet cowboy who spent more time with cattle than people. The advertisement had been his sister's idea during her visit last Christmas. Martha had taken one look at his empty house and lonely eyes and told him plainly that he was wasting away. She had written the advertisement herself, posted it in 3 Eastern newspapers, and sorted through the responses before presenting him with 5 letters from women seeking a new start out west. Valerie Brooks's letter had been the shortest. No flowery language about seeking adventure or finding true love. Just simple facts. She was 24 years old, had worked as a seamstress in Boston, Massachusetts, had no family to speak of, and was willing to relocate for the purpose of marriage. Something about that honesty had appealed to him. He was 31, too old for romantic illusions. The days until March 28th crawled by with excruciating slowness. Dalton threw himself into work, mending fences, tending to his small herd of cattle, preparing the house. He aired out the bedroom that would be hers until they were properly married, washed the curtains, and even picked wildflowers for the table, though they wilted before the day was through. On the morning of her arrival, he rode into Clifton Hill early, bathed at the bathhouse, and put on his best shirt. The stage was due at noon. He waited outside the general store, hat in his hands, watching the road with a mixture of anticipation and dread. The stage arrived 20 minutes late, trailing dust and pulled by 4 exhausted horses. Dalton's heart hammered against his ribs as the driver climbed down and opened the door. An elderly couple emerged first, then a traveling salesman with cases of goods, and finally, a woman in a dark blue traveling dress. She was smaller than he expected, barely reaching his shoulder. Her hair was a rich brown, pulled back severely from her face. But it was her eyes that caught him, large and cautious, the color of storm clouds. She looked at him with an expression he could not quite read, something between hope and fear. "Miss Brooks?" he asked, stepping forward. "Mr. Pierce." Her voice was soft, cultivated, the accent of someone educated. "Yes, madam. Welcome to Clifton Hill." He reached for her bag, a worn carpet bag that looked like it had seen better days. Their hands brushed briefly and she flinched, pulling back so quickly he almost dropped the bag. "I apologize," she said immediately. "The journey was long. I am tired." "Of course. I have a wagon waiting. The ranch is about 5 miles outside town." She nodded, following him to where his wagon and horses waited. He helped her up onto the seat, careful not to touch her more than necessary after her earlier reaction. She arranged her skirts with precise movements, her hands covered in thin cotton gloves despite the Arizona heat. The ride to the ranch was quiet. Dalton attempted conversation several times, pointing out landmarks, asking about her journey, but her responses were brief and polite. He found himself studying her from the corner of his eye. She was pretty in a delicate way, with fine features and pale skin that spoke of too much time indoors. But there was a tension in her shoulders, a wariness in the way she held herself that made him think of a wild horse, ready to bolt at any moment. "It is beautiful here," she said finally as they crested a hill and his ranch came into view. "Very different from Boston." "I imagine so." "Do you think you will like it?" "I do not know yet." The honesty of her answer surprised him, "But I will try." When they arrived at the house, Dalton carried her bag inside and showed her to her room. She stood in the doorway, taking in the simple furnishings, the clean white curtains, the quilt his mother had made years ago. "This is very kind," she said. "Thank you. I thought we could be married next week if that suits you. Give you some time to settle in, get to know each other a bit. Reverend Thompson can perform the ceremony." Something flickered across her face, too quick to identify. "That would be acceptable. Are you hungry? I can make something." "I would prefer to rest if you do not mind, of course. I will be outside if you need anything." She nodded and closed the door softly. Dalton stood in the hallway for a moment, then retreated to the porch where he sat heavily in his rocking chair. This was not going as he had hoped, though he was not sure what he had been hoping for exactly. That evening, he prepared a simple dinner of beef stew and biscuits. When he knocked on her door to call her to the table, she emerged wearing the same dress, her hair still pulled back in that severe style. They ate in near silence, the scrape of spoons against bowls the only sound. "This is very good," she offered. "Thank you. I have been cooking for myself for a while now. How long have you been alone?" 3 years. My wife died of fever." "I am sorry." She looked down at her bowl. "That must have been difficult." "It was, but life goes on." He took a drink of water. "What about you? The letter said you had no family." Her hands tightened on her spoon. "No, no family. Must have been hard being alone in Boston." "It was." She did not elaborate and he did not push. After dinner, she insisted on washing the dishes despite his protests. He watched her work, noting the efficiency of her movements. The way she kept her sleeves pulled down to her wrists, even as she worked with the hot water. When she reached up to put a plate on the shelf, her sleeve slipped back slightly, and he caught a glimpse of something that made his breath catch. A scar, white and raised, circling her wrist like a bracelet. She noticed his gaze and quickly pulled her sleeve down, turning away. The tension in the room thickened. "I should turn in," she said quietly. "Thank you for dinner." "Valerie." He spoke her name gently. She paused but did not turn around. "Whatever you have been through, whatever happened before, it does not matter to me. You are safe here." Her shoulders trembled slightly. "Good night, Mr. Pierce." She left before he could say anything else. Dalton stood alone in his kitchen, troubled by what he had seen and what he had not seen, by all the things she was not saying. The days that followed established a careful rhythm. Valerie rose early, always dressed completely with her hair pinned back before she emerged from her room. She cooked breakfast, cleaned the house, and began sewing curtains for the sitting room. She was efficient, quiet, and kept a careful distance between herself and Dalton at all times. He respected that distance, though it pained him. He had hoped for companionship, perhaps eventually affection, but she seemed determined to keep walls between them. He noticed other things too. She never rolled up her sleeves, even in the heat. She flinched at sudden movements. Sometimes he would see her staring out the window with an expression of such profound sadness, it made his chest ache. The scars haunted him. That first glimpse had shown him enough to know there were more, and that they had not come from accidents. Someone had hurt her badly, and the knowledge of it made him angry in a way he had not been angry in years. But he kept his promise. He did not ask. On Sunday, he took her into town for church. She dressed carefully in her blue traveling dress, the only dress she seemed to own, and sat quietly beside him during the service. Afterward, the townspeople gathered around, curious about the mail-order bride. "This is my intended Valerie Brooks." Dalton introduced her to the Reverend and his wife, to the shopkeeper, to the doctor and his family. She smiled politely, shook hands carefully, said all the right things. But he could see the strain in her eyes, the exhaustion of maintaining appearances. Martha arrived at the ranch the following Tuesday, bringing with her a whirlwind of energy and opinions. His sister was everything Valerie was not: loud, cheerful, and impossible to ignore. "So you are Valerie," Martha said, sweeping into the house without invitation. "I am Martha, Dalton's impossibly nosy sister. I have come to help you prepare for the wedding and to make sure my brother is treating you well." Valerie looked startled by the sudden intrusion, but Martha did not wait for a response. She pulled out fabric samples, chattering about making a proper wedding dress, talking about flowers and food and all the details Dalton had not even considered. "Martha, maybe Miss Brooks would like to rest," Dalton suggested, seeing the overwhelmed expression on Valerie's face. "Nonsense. There is too much to do." But Martha paused, really looking at Valerie for the first time, her expression softened. "Unless you truly are tired, I can be too much, or so everyone tells me." "I am fine," Valerie said quietly. "A dress would be nice. I have very little with me." "Then we shall make several dresses. Come, show me your room and we can take measurements." The two women disappeared down the hallway, leaving Dalton to wonder if his sister's arrival was a blessing or a complication. He could hear their voices, Martha's animated chatter interspersed with Valerie's quieter responses. An hour later, Martha emerged alone, her face troubled. She found Dalton in the barn. "That girl has been hurt," Martha said without preamble. "Badly. I know. You know by whom." "She has not said. I have not asked." Martha studied her brother. "That is very patient of you. What else can I do? If I push, she will run. I can see it in her eyes. She is terrified, Dalton. When I was measuring her for the dress, I saw the scars on her arms, her back. Some old, some not so old." Martha's voice caught. "What kind of monster does that to another person?" Dalton felt that familiar anger rise up, hot and fierce. He forced it down. "Someone who cannot hurt her anymore. She is here now. She is safe. Are you certain you want to marry her?" "I do not mean to sound cruel, but she is clearly carrying terrible wounds. It will not be an easy marriage." "I am certain." He was surprised by how much he meant it. In the few days since Valerie's arrival, something had shifted in him. He wanted to protect her, to give her a place where she could heal. "She deserves kindness, Martha. She deserves someone who will not hurt her." His sister smiled, touching his cheek gently. "You are a good man, Dalton Pierce, better than most." Martha stayed for 3 days, sewing with a fury. She measured Valerie carefully, worked late into the night, and by the time she left, there were 3 new dresses hanging in Valerie's room, including a simple but beautiful wedding dress of cream-colored cotton with lace at the collar and cuffs. The night before Martha left, Dalton overheard the 2 women talking in the kitchen. He had come in from checking on the horses, and their voices stopped him in the doorway. "You do not have to marry him if you do not want to," Martha was saying. "If you need money for a ticket back east, I can help." "There is nothing for me back east." Valerie's voice was firm. "And your brother is a kind man. I am grateful for this opportunity. Gratitude is not love. No, but perhaps it is a beginning." There was a long pause. "He will be patient with you, Valerie. He will not push. But someday I hope you will tell him what happened. Secrets have a way of festering. I know, but not yet. I am not ready. Then I will not pressure you either, but know that you have a friend in me should you ever need one. Dalton quietly retreated before they could discover him listening. That night, lying in his bed, he thought about what it meant to love someone who was broken. He did not have the answers, but he knew he was willing to try. The wedding took place on a bright Saturday morning in early April. The small church was filled with curious townspeople, all wanting to witness the marriage of the quiet cowboy to the mysterious mail-order bride. Valerie wore the cream dress Martha had made, her hair loosened slightly to frame her face. She looked beautiful and terrified in equal measure. Dalton stood at the front of the church in his Sunday best, watching her walk down the aisle alone. He wished she had someone to give her a way to stand beside her, but she moved with quiet dignity, her eyes fixed on him. When she reached him, he took her hand gently. It trembled in his. "It will be all right," he whispered. She nodded, not trusting her voice. Reverend Thompson performed the ceremony with solemn grace. The vows were traditional, the words ancient and binding. When it came time for the ring, Dalton slipped a simple gold band onto her finger. He had spent weeks' wages on it, wanting her to have something beautiful. "You may kiss your bride," the Reverend announced. Dalton leaned forward slowly, giving Valerie time to pull away if she wanted. She did not. Their lips met briefly, chastely, and when he pulled back, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. The reception was held at the ranch, tables set up in the yard, food brought by neighbors who were happy for any excuse to celebrate. Dalton stayed close to Valerie, sensing her discomfort with so many people. She smiled and thanked everyone for their kindness, but he could see the strain building. Finally, as the sun began to set and the guests started to leave, they found themselves alone. Valerie stood on the porch, watching the last wagon disappear down the road. "Are you all right?" Dalton asked. "Yes, everyone was very kind. They are good people mostly." She turned to face him, and in the fading light he could see the fear in her eyes. "What happens now?" He understood what she was asking. "Now we clean up this mess of a yard. Then I thought I would sit on the porch with a cup of coffee and enjoy the evening. You are welcome to join me if you like." The relief that flooded her face was almost painful to witness. "That sounds nice." They worked together in comfortable silence, clearing tables, washing dishes, putting everything back in order. When they finally settled onto the porch with their coffee, the stars were beginning to appear overhead. "Thank you," Valerie said softly. "For what?" "For not expecting things. For being patient." "Valerie, we are married now, that is true, but I meant what I said before. You are safe here, I will not hurt you, and I will not force you into anything you are not ready for." She was quiet for a long moment. "You are a good man, Dalton Pierce. I am not certain I deserve your kindness. Everyone deserves kindness. Not everyone." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Some people deserve what they get." "Is that what someone told you? The person who hurt you?" She stiffened, and he thought she might retreat. But instead she took a shaky breath. "My uncle. After my parents died when I was 16, I went to live with him and his wife in Boston. He seemed kind at first, but his wife was often ill, bedridden, and when we were alone." She stopped, her hands clenching around her coffee cup. "He said it was my fault, that I tempted him, that I deserved punishment for being wicked." Dalton felt rage building in his chest, hot and fierce. He forced himself to remain still to keep his voice calm. "You were a child. Nothing that happened was your fault." "I was not always a child. It went on for years. I tried to leave, but he always found me. The scars are from when I tried to resist." She pulled up her sleeve, showing him the white bands around her wrists. "He tied me to the bed sometimes. The rope would cut into my skin." The cup in Dalton's hand cracked. He set it down carefully, struggling to control his emotions. Where is he now? Dead. He died 6 months ago of a heart problem. His wife followed shortly after. I was finally free, but I had nothing. No money, no prospects, just a small room in a boarding house and work that barely paid for food. When I saw your advertisement, it seemed like an answer to a prayer I had not dared to pray. Dalton turned to face her fully. In the starlight, he could see tears streaming down her face. Slowly, carefully, he reached out and wiped them away with his thumb. She did not flinch this time. "You are free now," he said firmly. "Truly free. That man is dead and gone, and he cannot hurt you anymore. And I swear to you, on everything I hold sacred, I will never raise a hand to you. I will never force you. You are my wife, yes, but you are also your own person, deserving of respect and gentleness." She sobbed then, great heaving gasps that shook her small frame. Dalton pulled her into his arms, holding her while she cried out years of pain and fear and shame. She clutched at his shirt, soaking it with her tears, and he just held her, murmuring soft words of comfort. When the storm finally passed, she pulled back, embarrassed. "I am sorry. I have made a mess of your shirt." "I do not care about the shirt." He cupped her face in his hands. "I care about you. You are incredibly brave, Valerie. To survive what you survived, to have the courage to start over, that takes strength most people do not have. I do not feel brave. I feel broken. Then we will put you back together, piece by piece, for as long as it takes." She leaned into his touch, closing her eyes. "I want to believe that is possible. It is. I promise you it is." That night she slept in her own room and Dalton slept in his, but something had shifted between them. The secret was out, the worst of it spoken aloud, and there was relief in that. The next morning, Valerie appeared at breakfast without her gloves. It was a small thing, but Dalton recognized it for what it was: trust. She was letting him see her scars, accepting that he knew the truth and had not turned away. The weeks that followed were easier. Valerie began to relax, to smile more freely. She worked in the garden, planting vegetables and herbs. She cooked meals that filled the house with wonderful smells. She sat with Dalton on the porch in the evenings, talking about nothing and everything. He learned that she loved to read but had few books. He ordered a dozen from the catalog, delighting in her joy when they arrived. She learned that he could play the harmonica and begged him to play for her in the evenings. The music seemed to soothe something in her. Slowly, carefully, they built a life together. Dalton showed her how to ride a horse, patient when she was nervous, celebrating when she managed a full circuit of the corral. Valerie taught him about the different stitches in sewing, laughing when his attempts at mending resulted in crooked seams. They learned each other's rhythms, each other's moods. Dalton discovered that Valerie loved thunderstorms and would stand on the porch watching the lightning with wonder. Valerie learned that Dalton was quietest in the mornings, needing his coffee before conversation. One evening in late May, nearly 2 months after their wedding, they were sitting on the porch when Valerie reached over and took Dalton's hand. It was the first time she had initiated physical contact, and his heart leaped. "Thank you for being patient with me," she said softly. "You are worth the patience." She smiled, that real smile that made her whole face light up. "I think I am beginning to believe that." "Good." They sat in comfortable silence, hands intertwined, watching the sun set over the Arizona landscape. Dalton felt something warm and hopeful blooming in his chest. This was not the passionate romance of dime novels, but it was real and growing stronger every day. That night, after they had both retired to their separate rooms, there was a soft knock on Dalton's door. He opened it to find Valerie standing there in her nightgown, her hair loose around her shoulders. "I do not want to be alone tonight," she said quietly. "Would you just hold me?" "Of course." She climbed into his bed and he wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close. She fit against him perfectly, her head resting on his chest. He could feel her heartbeat gradually slowing, her breathing evening out. "Dalton," she whispered. "Yes, I think I'm falling in love with you." His arms tightened around her. "I know I am falling in love with you." She tilted her head up to look at him. In the moonlight streaming through the window, her eyes were soft and wondering. Slowly, she reached up and kissed him. It was tender and sweet and full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, she smiled. "I am ready. I want to be your wife in every way." "Are you certain?" "I am certain. With you, I feel safe. With you, I feel like I can be whole again." What followed was tender and gentle, Dalton careful to be patient, to let her set the pace. There were moments when she tensed, when old memories threatened to intrude, but he would pause, whisper reassurances, remind her that she was safe. And gradually she relaxed into him, into the pleasure and intimacy of it all. Afterward, she cried again, but these were different tears. "I never thought I could have this," she said. "I never thought I could feel this way about someone." "Neither did I." He kissed her forehead. "But here we are," she echoed, snuggling closer. They fell asleep tangled together, and when morning came, Valerie was still there, still in his arms. She woke slowly, smiling when she saw him watching her. "Good morning, husband." "Good morning, wife," she laughed, the sound bright and joyful. "I like the sound of that. So do I." The summer unfolded in a haze of happiness. They worked side by side, building their ranch, their life together. Valerie proved to have a gift with animals, gentle and patient. She helped Dalton with the cattle, learning to rope and brand despite her small size. He loved watching her work, her face flushed with exertion, her eyes bright with accomplishment. In July, Martha returned for a visit and was delighted by the change in both of them. "You look happy," she told Valerie during a quiet moment. "Truly happy." "I am." Valerie glanced over to where Dalton was chopping wood, his shirt sleeves rolled up, his movements strong and sure. "He saved me, Martha. I do not mean from my uncle, though that too. He saved me from believing I was worthless, that I was damaged beyond repair." "You saved yourself," Martha corrected gently. "Dalton just gave you a safe place to do it. Perhaps. Either way, I am grateful. He loves you, you know. I can see it in everything he does." "I know, and I love him." Valerie smiled. "I never thought I would be able to say that and mean it." In August, Valerie realized her monthly courses had not come. She waited another week to be certain, then another, before finally telling Dalton one evening after dinner. "I think I am with child," she said quietly. Dalton's face went through a series of expressions, surprise, joy, and then concern. "Are you happy about this?" "I am." She took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "I never thought I would want children after everything, but with you I want this. I want a family." He kissed her then, deep and loving. "You have made me the happiest man alive." The pregnancy was not easy. Valerie was sick most mornings, exhausted in the afternoons. But Dalton was attentive, bringing her tea, rubbing her back, taking over most of the household chores without complaint. She loved him all the more for his care. In September, they announced the news to their friends in town. The women rallied around Valerie, offering advice and hand-me-down baby clothes. The men clapped Dalton on the back, teasing him about sleepless nights to come. As autumn painted the landscape in shades of gold and red, Valerie's belly grew round. She sewed tiny clothes, prepared a nursery in the third bedroom, and read every book on childbirth she could get her hands on. Dalton built a cradle from oak, carving intricate designs into the headboard. One cool October evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Valerie took Dalton's hand. "I need to tell you something." "What is it?" "When I first came here, I thought I was just looking for safety. a place to hide from the world, but you gave me so much more than that. You gave me a reason to heal, to hope, to believe in good things again." She turned to face him, her eyes shining. "You showed me that love does not have to hurt, that being vulnerable does not make me weak. You have been so patient, so kind, never asking for more than I could give. I want you to know that I see it, I appreciate it, and I love you more than I ever thought possible." Dalton felt his throat tighten with emotion. "Valerie, you have given me just as much. Before you came, I was just going through the motions of living. You brought light back into this house, into my life. Watching you heal, watching you become strong and confident has been the greatest privilege of my life." She kissed him then, soft and sweet, and they sat together as the stars began to appear, planning for the future, for the family they were building together. Winter came early that year, dusting the landscape with snow by late November. Valerie was large now, moving carefully, her hands often resting on her belly. The baby was active, kicking and rolling, and Dalton loved to feel the movements under his palm. "He is going to be a fighter," Dalton said one night, feeling a particularly strong kick. Valerie corrected with a smile. "She is going to be strong and brave. We will love whichever we get. We will." In mid-December, during a rare warm spell, Valerie went into labor. Dalton rode frantically into town to fetch the doctor and Martha, who had come to stay for the birth. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next morning. Dalton paced outside the bedroom door, listening to Valerie's cries, feeling helpless. Finally, as dawn was breaking, he heard a different cry, the sharp, indignant wail of a newborn. Martha emerged a few minutes later, grinning. "You have a son," she announced. "A big, healthy boy." Dalton rushed into the room. Valerie lay exhausted against the pillows, her hair damp with sweat, but she was smiling. In her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in a blanket. He crossed to the bed, looking down at his son for the first time. The baby had a shock of dark hair in Valerie's eyes. His tiny fist waved in the air as if already reaching for something. "He is perfect," Dalton whispered. "He is." Valerie looked up at her husband. "Would you like to hold him?" Dalton took the baby carefully, cradling him against his chest. The weight of him, the reality of this new life, was overwhelming. "Hello, son. I am your father." The baby's eyes focused on him, and Dalton felt his heart expand with a love so fierce it almost frightened him. This was his child, his and Valerie's, proof that beautiful things could grow from pain and patience. "What should we name him?" Valerie asked. They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy, but none of them had felt quite right. Now, looking at his son, one name came to mind. "Daniel," Dalton said. "Daniel Pierce. It means God is my judge." Valerie smiled. "Daniel, I like that. Daniel Thomas Pierce, after your father," he would have been proud. Dalton's father had died years ago, but the memory of him still brought warmth. So proud. They spent the rest of the day marveling at their son, counting his fingers and toes, watching him sleep and eat and exist. Martha helped with everything, cooking meals, tidying the house, giving the new parents space to bond with their baby. The first few weeks were exhausting. Daniel was a hungry baby, waking every few hours to nurse. Valerie was tired but radiant, nursing their son with a contentment that spoke of deep fulfillment. Dalton helped however he could, changing diapers, walking Daniel when he was fussy, singing to him in the middle of the night. One such night, around 3 in the morning, Dalton sat in the rocking chair with Daniel against his shoulder, humming softly. Valerie appeared in the doorway, wrapped in a shawl. "You should be sleeping," Dalton whispered. "I woke up and you were both gone. I wanted to make sure everything was all right. We are fine. He was gassy, so I have been walking him." She crossed to them, looking down at Daniel's peaceful face. He looks like you when he sleeps. He has your nose. Perhaps. She leaned against Dalton's shoulder. I never imagined this, you know. A year ago I was alone and terrified. Now I have you and Daniel and this beautiful life. It does not seem real. It is real. Dalton kissed the top of her head, and it is only going to get better. Christmas that year was perfect. They kept it simple, exchanging small gifts and cooking a modest feast. Daniel was too young to understand, but they hung stockings for him anyway, filling his with tiny wooden toys Dalton had carved. On Christmas morning, as they sat together by the fire, Daniel sleeping peacefully in his cradle, Valerie leaned against Dalton's side. "This is what I want," she said softly. "All those years of pain, they brought me here, to you, to this family. I would not change a thing if it meant losing this." "You are the strongest person I know," Dalton told her, "and the best mother Daniel could ask for. And you are the best father, the best husband." She turned to kiss him. "I love you, Dalton Pierce. I love you, Valerie Pierce." As winter gave way to spring, Daniel grew and thrived. He was a happy baby, quick to smile, curious about everything. Valerie recovered from the birth, her strength returning. The ranch prospered, the cattle multiplying, the land producing. By the time Daniel was 6 months old, they had established a comfortable routine. Mornings were for chores, Daniel often strapped to Valerie's back in a carrier Dalton had fashioned. Afternoons were for rest and play. Evenings were for family time, the three of them together on the porch, watching the sunset. One evening in late May, as they celebrated their first wedding anniversary, Dalton gave Valerie a gift, a leather-bound journal. "For your thoughts," he said. "I know you used to write before, and I thought you might want to again." She opened it, tears welling in her eyes. "This is perfect." "Thank you." That night, after Daniel was asleep and Dalton was snoring softly beside her, Valerie opened the journal and wrote her first entry. "A year ago today, I married a stranger. I was terrified, scarred inside and out, certain that I was broken beyond repair. But Dalton never saw me as broken. He saw me as someone worthy of love, of patience, of kindness. He never asked about the scars, never demanded explanations. He just loved me purely and completely until I learned to love myself again. Now we have a son, a home, a life filled with joy. The scars are still there, but they no longer define me. I am Valerie Pierce, wife, mother, survivor, and I am happy." She closed the journal and set it aside, then curled up against her husband's warm body. He stirred, pulling her closer even in sleep. She smiled, closing her eyes, grateful beyond measure for this man who had saved her by never trying to, who had healed her by simply loving her. The years that followed were good ones. Daniel grew into a sturdy boy with his mother's gentle nature and his father's quiet strength. When he was 3, Valerie became pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier and the birth brought them a daughter, Anna Rose, who had red gold hair and green eyes. Where did she get that coloring? Valerie wondered, nursing her daughter for the first time. "My mother had red hair," Dalton said, "and those are definitely Pierce eyes." Anna was a more challenging baby than Daniel had been, colicky and fussy. But they managed together, Dalton walking her at night while Valerie rested, Daniel helping by fetching diapers and singing to his baby sister. The ranch continued to grow. They added more cattle, built a new barn, hired a young man named Peter to help with the heavier work. Their home was always filled with noise now, children laughing, animals wandering through, friends stopping by for visits. Valerie blossomed in this life. The scared, scarred woman who had stepped off that stage years ago was gone, replaced by someone confident and strong. She became known in Clifton Hill for her kindness, always ready to help a neighbor, to bring food to the sick, to offer advice to new mothers. The scars were still there, hidden under her sleeves, but they were just part of her story now, not the whole of it. When Daniel was 7 and Anna was 4, the children asked about the marks on their mother's wrists. They had glimpsed them one summer day when Valerie was doing laundry, her sleeves rolled up. Valerie looked at Dalton, uncertain. He nodded encouragingly. She knelt down to the children's level. "These are scars from a long time ago before I came to live here. I was hurt by someone who was supposed to take care of me." "Who hurt you?" Daniel asked, his young face serious. "My uncle. But he is gone now and he cannot hurt me anymore." "Did Papa save you?" Anna asked. Valerie smiled, glancing at her husband. "In a way, yes. Your Papa gave me a safe place to heal. He showed me that not everyone wants to hurt you, that love can be gentle and kind." Daniel hugged his mother fiercely. "I will never let anyone hurt you." "I know, sweetheart. But the important thing to understand is that even when bad things happen, we can heal. We can be happy again. I am proof of that." Anna hugged her too, and Valerie held both her children close, grateful for this moment, for this life, for the man who had made it all possible. That night, after the children were asleep, Dalton found Valerie on the porch, staring up at the stars. "You handled that well," he said, sitting beside her. "I wanted them to know. Not the details, they are too young for that, but I wanted them to understand that hard things can be overcome. You have overcome so much." He took her hand. "I am so proud of you. I could not have done it without you." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "You gave me something precious, Dalton. You gave me time. Time to heal, time to trust, time to learn how to love. You never rushed me, never demanded more than I could give. That patience saved me. You saved yourself. I just loved you while you did it." She turned to kiss him, deep and lingering. "And I love you, more every day." As the years continued to pass, their life together deepened and strengthened. There were challenges, of course. A drought one year that decimated the herd. A broken leg when Dalton fell from a horse. Childhood illnesses that kept them up at night. But they faced everything together, their love a steady foundation. When Daniel was 12, he came to them with questions about his future. He wanted to be a rancher like his father, to take over the family land someday. Dalton was proud, teaching his son everything he knew about cattle and horses and the land. Anna, at 9, showed a different inclination. She loved books and learning, spending hours reading everything she could get her hands on. Valerie encouraged this, ordering books from catalogs, teaching her daughter everything she knew. "She might want to be a teacher," Valerie said one evening, watching Anna read by lamplight. "Would that bother you? Having a daughter who moves away for schooling? It would be hard, but I want her to have opportunities. I want both our children to have choices." Dalton pulled her close. "They will have choices because of you. Because you chose to be brave, to start over, to build a life worth living." One fall day when Daniel was 14 and Anna was 11, Martha came to visit with grave news. She was ill, the doctor said, something in her lungs that could not be fixed. She wanted to spend her remaining time at the ranch, with family. Dalton was devastated. Martha had been his closest confidant, his sister and friend. They moved her into the spare bedroom, and Valerie cared for her with gentle efficiency. The children spent hours with their aunt, listening to her stories, soaking up her wisdom. 3 months later, on a cold January morning, Martha passed away peacefully in her sleep. The family mourned together, holding each other through the grief. At the funeral, Dalton spoke about his sister's kindness, her meddling ways that had brought him and Valerie together. "She always wanted me to be happy," Dalton said, his voice thick with emotion. "She succeeded beyond measure. Martha, thank you for everything." After the funeral, as they stood at Martha's grave, Valerie took Dalton's hand. "She was a good woman. I am grateful I got to know her. She loved you like a sister. She told me once that you were the best thing that ever happened to me. She was right. Valerie smiled through her tears. But I think you were the best thing that happened to me. They stood together in silence, mourning and remembering, grateful for the time they had been given. Life continued its inevitable march forward. Daniel grew into a strong, capable young man, taking on more responsibility around the ranch. At 18, he fell in love with a girl from town, sweet Emily Carter. The courtship was proper and traditional, and a year later they married in the same church where Dalton and Valerie had wed. It seems like just yesterday I was holding him for the first time, Valerie said, watching Daniel dance with his bride at the reception. He is a good man. You raised him well. We raised him well, she corrected. Anna, at 15, was preparing to go to boarding school in Tucson, determined to become a teacher. It was hard to let her go, but they supported her dreams. The house felt emptier without her lively presence, but she wrote letters every week, full of her experiences and learning. With the children grown and building their own lives, Dalton and Valerie found themselves alone together for the first time in years. It was an adjustment, but a welcome one. "What do we do now?" Valerie asked one evening, the house quiet around them. "We enjoy each other. We have been so busy raising children and running the ranch. Now we can just be," she smiled. "I like the sound of that." They traveled together, taking a trip to California to see the ocean. Valerie stood at the water's edge, tears streaming down her face at the beauty of it. They visited Anna at school, proud of her accomplishments. They welcomed Daniel and Emily's first child, a grandson they named after Dalton's father. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Dalton surprised Valerie with a party. The whole town came, celebrating the couple who had become pillars of the community. There were speeches about their kindness, their generosity, their love for each other that had inspired so many. Standing before everyone, Dalton raised his glass in a toast. 20 years ago, I placed an advertisement for a mail-order bride. I was lonely and hoping for companionship. What I got was so much more. Valerie, you brought light into my life. You gave me a family, a purpose, a love deeper than I ever imagined possible. Thank you for taking a chance on a quiet cowboy in Arizona. Thank you for trusting me with your heart. Here is to 20 more years and 20 after that. Everyone cheered, but Valerie only had eyes for her husband. She stood and kissed him, not caring that everyone was watching. "Thank you for being patient," she whispered. "Thank you for loving me when I could not love myself. Thank you for showing me what love truly is." The years continued to be kind to them. They watched Daniel build his family, eventually adding 2 more children to the first. They watched Anna graduate from her teaching program and take a position at the school in Clifton Hill, wanting to be close to home. At 23, Anna married a kind young man named Samuel, a doctor who had recently opened a practice in town. Dalton and Valerie grew older together, their hair graying, their faces weathering like the Arizona landscape around them. But the love between them only deepened, a constant in a changing world. One summer evening, when Dalton was 58 and Valerie was 51, they sat on their porch as they had done thousands of times before. The ranch stretched out before them, prosperous and beautiful. In the distance, they could see Daniel working with his eldest son, teaching him as Dalton had once taught Daniel. "We built something good here," Valerie said softly. "We did. You ever regret it?" Placing that advertisement, Dalton turned to look at his wife. She was still beautiful to him, every line on her face a testament to the life they had lived together. "Never, not for a single moment. Even though I came with so much baggage, so many scars, especially because of that, you taught me what real strength looks like. You showed me that love is not about perfection, it is about acceptance. You made me a better man, Valerie Pierce." She reached for his hand, her fingers interlacing with his. The scars on her wrists were faded now, barely visible, just part of the tapestry of her skin. "You never asked about them. In all these years, you never once demanded explanations or made me feel ashamed. There was nothing to ask. The past was past. I was only interested in our future. You saved my life, you know, not by rescuing me, but by showing me I was worth saving. And you saved mine. Before you came, I was just existing. You taught me how to live again." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Around them, the ranch bustled with life. Grandchildren playing in the yard, Daniel and Emily preparing dinner in the old bunkhouse they had converted to a home, Anna and Samuel driving up the road for their weekly visit. "This is what I dreamed of," Valerie said. "When I was at my lowest, when I thought I would never escape, I dreamed of something like this. Peace, family, love. I just never believed it was possible. It was always possible. You just needed someone who was willing to be patient while you figured that out." She laughed softly. The patient cowboy, always. As the stars began to appear overhead, their grandchildren ran up to the porch, begging for a story. Valerie and Dalton gathered them close, the children piling around them with the easy affection of those who have always known love. "Tell us how you met," Daniel's youngest daughter begged. "Tell us about when Grandma came on the train." Valerie and Dalton exchanged glances, smiling. "Well," Valerie began, "it was March of 1876, and I was very nervous. I had traveled all the way from Boston to marry a man I had never met." As she told the story, editing it for young ears, Dalton held her hand and filled in details. The children listened raptly, asking questions, exclaiming over the romance of it all. When the story was finished, Anna's oldest son asked, "So you loved each other right away?" "Not right away," Dalton admitted. "Love takes time to grow, especially deep love. But I knew from the beginning that your grandmother was special, and I was willing to wait as long as it took for her to see that too." "That is the most important thing," Valerie added. "Real love is patient. Real love does not demand or force. It just is, steady and true." Later, after the children had been collected by their parents and the house was quiet again, Valerie and Dalton prepared for bed. They moved around each other with the practiced ease of decades, anticipating each other's needs without speaking. As they lay in bed together, Valerie's head on Dalton's chest, she thought about the girl who had arrived in Clifton Hill all those years ago. That frightened, scarred woman seemed like another person entirely. In her place was someone strong, someone loved, someone who had built a beautiful life from the ashes of her pain. "Dalton," she whispered into the darkness, "I am happy. Completely, utterly happy. I wanted you to know that." He kissed the top of her head. "I know I am happy too. When I look back at everything, even the hard parts, I cannot regret any of it. It all led me here to you, to this life. The scars made you who you are, strong and compassionate and brave. I love all of you, including the scars." She lifted her head to kiss him, sweet and gentle. "I love you, Dalton Pierce. Thank you for never asking and for always loving. I love you, Valerie Pierce. Thank you for taking a chance on a patient cowboy." They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, content in the life they had built together. The years rolled on, bringing more grandchildren, more joy, more memories. They watched Daniel's ranch become as prosperous as their own, eventually combining the two properties into one large family operation. They attended Anna's students' recitals and graduations, proud of the difference their daughter was making. They took in stray animals, helped struggling neighbors, and remained the heart of their community. When Dalton turned 65, The town threw him a birthday celebration. People came from miles around to honor the cowboy who had built a legacy of kindness and hard work. Valerie stood beside him through it all, his constant companion and greatest love. In his speech, Dalton surprised everyone by focusing not on his accomplishments, but on his wife. Everything good in my life came from one decision: to place an advertisement for a mail-order bride. Valerie arrived with nothing but a carpet bag and more courage than anyone I have ever known. She was broken, but she put herself back together. She was scared, but she chose to trust. She was alone, but she built a family. If I have done anything worth celebrating in my life, it is because she was beside me, making me better every single day. There was not a dry eye in the house as Valerie joined him at the front, their hands clasped together. She spoke briefly, her voice strong and clear. 30 years ago, I stepped off a stage in Clifton Hill, terrified and hopeful in equal measure. This man, this patient, kind man, welcomed me without judgment. He loved me without conditions. He showed me that I was worthy of good things. Everything I am, everything we built together, started with his willingness to see past the scars to the person underneath. That is the greatest gift anyone has ever given me. They kissed to thunderous applause, and the celebration continued long into the night. As they grew older still, their bodies slowing but their minds sharp, they found new ways to contribute. Valerie began teaching sewing classes to young women in town, passing on her skills. Dalton mentored young ranchers, sharing the wisdom of decades. Together, they were beloved fixtures in Clifton Hill, the couple everyone pointed to as an example of what love should be. On their 40th wedding anniversary, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren, they renewed their vows in the same church where they had married. The ceremony was simple but deeply moving. I, Dalton Pierce, recommit my life to you, Valerie, Dalton said, his voice wavering with age but strong with conviction. For 40 years, you have been my companion, my love, my reason for waking up each morning. I promise to love you for whatever time we have left, to hold your hand through whatever comes, to be your patient cowboy until my last breath. Valerie squeezed his hands, tears flowing freely down her weathered face. I, Valerie Pierce, recommit my life to you, Dalton. You saw me when I was invisible. You loved me when I was unlovable. You were patient when I needed patience, strong when I needed strength, gentle when I needed gentleness. I promise to love you always in this life and whatever comes after. Their kiss was tender and sweet, the kiss of two people who had walked through fire together and emerged stronger for it. Afterward, at the reception, their children gave speeches. Daniel spoke of his father's integrity and work ethic, his mother's kindness and wisdom. Anna spoke of growing up in a home filled with love, of parents who showed through example what a marriage should be. They taught us that love is not just a feeling, Anna said. It is a choice made every single day. It is patience when things are hard. It is kindness when you are tired. It is showing up, over and over, no matter what. That is what real love looks like. As the sun set on their anniversary, Dalton and Valerie found a quiet corner away from the crowd. They sat together, watching their family celebrate, feeling the weight and wonder of 40 years together. Can you believe we made it this far? Valerie asked. Every single day, Dalton replied. From the moment you arrived, I knew we would make it. You were too strong to fail. We were too strong, she corrected. Together, we were unstoppable. He brought her hand to his lips, kissing the scarred wrist gently. These marks used to represent pain. Now they represent survival, strength, victory. They represent you, she said softly. Your patience, your love, you healed me, Dalton. We healed each other. They sat together as darkness fell and the stars came out, the same stars that had witnessed their entire journey together. Around them, their family laughed and celebrated, living proof of what two broken people could build when they chose love over fear. The years that remained were tender and precious. They moved slower, tired more easily, but their love never faltered. Every morning, Dalton brought Valerie coffee in bed. Every evening, Valerie rubbed liniment into Dalton's aching joints. They held hands constantly, aware that time was finite, determined not to waste a moment. When Dalton turned 73, his heart began to fail. The doctor warned them that he likely did not have much time left. Rather than despair, they chose to make the most of every day. Their children and grandchildren visited constantly, the house filled with life and love. One warm spring evening, as they sat on their porch for what would be the last time, Dalton looked at his wife of 45 years and smiled. "No regrets. Not a single one," Valerie assured him. "You gave me a beautiful life, Dalton Pierce. We gave each other a beautiful life." He squeezed her hand weakly. "Promise me something, anything. Promise me you will keep living after I am gone. Really living, not just existing. You deserve every moment of happiness you can find." Tears streamed down her face. "I promise. But you are not gone yet, so stop talking like you are," he laughed softly. "Always so fierce. That is one of the things I love most about you." They sat together as the sun set, as they had done thousands of times before. Daniel and his family arrived, then Anna and hers. They gathered around, 3 generations of love, all because 2 scared people had taken a chance on each other decades ago. Dalton looked around at them all, his heart full despite its weakness. "I am a lucky man," he said, "to have all of you, to have had this life. Thank you for being my family." Later that night, in bed beside Valerie, Dalton's breathing became labored. She held him close, whispering words of love and comfort. Their children stood vigil, holding hands, tears flowing freely. "I love you," Dalton managed to say. "Always have, always will." "I love you too," Valerie whispered back. "Thank you for being patient. Thank you for seeing me when I could not see myself. Thank you for loving me." He smiled, his eyes closing. "Easiest thing I ever did." Those were his last words. He passed peacefully in the arms of the woman he had loved for 45 years, surrounded by the family they had built together. The funeral was held on a beautiful spring day, the church overflowing with people whose lives had been touched by Dalton Pierce. Valerie sat in the front row, flanked by her children, dry-eyed and composed. She had shed her tears in private. Now she wanted to celebrate the man who had given her everything. She stood to speak, her voice steady. "Dalton was the best man I have ever known. He was patient when patience was needed. He was strong when strength was called for. He was gentle when gentleness could heal. He took a broken woman and loved her until she was whole again. Not because he fixed her, but because he believed she could fix herself. That is real love. That is the legacy he leaves behind." After the funeral, after everyone had gone home and the house was quiet again, Valerie sat on the porch alone. She looked out at the ranch they had built together, at the life they had created. The grief was heavy, but beneath it was gratitude. She had been given 45 years with a man who had loved her unconditionally. How many people could say that, true to her promise, Valerie kept living? She took up painting, discovering a talent she never knew she had. She traveled with Anna, seeing the places she had always dreamed of. She spent time with her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, telling them stories about their grandfather, keeping his memory alive. She stayed in the ranch house, surrounded by memories. Every morning, she sat on the porch with her coffee and talked to Dalton as if he were there. She told him about the children, about the ranch, about her day. And sometimes, when the wind blew just right, She swore she could feel him there beside her. 5 years after Dalton's death, Valerie celebrated her 80th birthday surrounded by her enormous family. There were children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren everywhere, filling the house with noise and laughter. They had all inherited different pieces of Dalton and Valerie. Daniel had his father's work ethic. Anna had her mother's compassion. The grandchildren showed flashes of both. As the party wound down and people began to leave, Daniel sat with his mother on the porch. "Are you happy, Mama?" he asked. She smiled, the question bringing back memories of asking Valerie the same thing so many years ago. "I am. I miss your father every day, but I am grateful for the time we had. And I am so proud of all of you. You are proof that love can break cycles, that goodness can triumph. You taught us that. You and Papa. The way you loved each other, it showed us what to look for in our own lives. Your father was easy to love." She patted Daniel's hand. "He was patient and kind and good. I was the lucky one. He always said he was the lucky one. Then we were both right." That night, Valerie wrote in her journal, a habit she had maintained for over 40 years. The pages were filled with the story of her life with Dalton, every joy and sorrow documented. "Today I turned 80, she wrote. "My family gathered around me, all these beautiful people who exist because a patient cowboy took a chance on a scarred woman. I think about that girl who stepped off the stage in Clifton Hill, so afraid, so damaged. She could never have imagined this life, this love, this legacy. Dalton, wherever you are, thank you. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for waiting. Thank you for loving me until I learned to love myself. You were, and always will be, the love of my life." Valerie lived 5 more years, healthy and active until nearly the end. She died peacefully in her sleep at 85, in the bed she had shared with Dalton for so many years. Her children found her in the morning, a smile on her face, her journal open beside her to a page that read simply, "Going to find my cowboy now. What an adventure this has been." She was buried beside Dalton, their graves overlooking the ranch they had built together. The headstones were simple. Dalton Pierce, beloved husband, father, and grandfather, he loved well. And Valerie Pierce, beloved wife, mother, and grandmother, she was loved well. Their story became legend in Clifton Hill, passed down through generations. People spoke of the mail-order bride who arrived with scars and the patient cowboy who never asked about them, only loved. They spoke of a love that healed wounds, broke cycles, and created a legacy of kindness that continued long after both were gone. The ranch stayed in the family, passed down through the generations. The house remained largely unchanged, a testament to the life that had been lived there. And every spring, on the anniversary of that first meeting, the family gathered at the graves to remember and celebrate the love story that had started it all. Daniel, now an old man himself, stood at his parents' graves with his own children and grandchildren around him. "They taught us what love really means," he told the young ones. "Not the easy love of poems and songs, but the real love that shows up every day. The love that is patient through pain, kind through difficulty, steadfast through everything. That is the legacy they left us. That is what we carry forward." As the family stood together, paying tribute to Dalton and Valerie Pierce, a warm breeze blew across the ranch. It carried with it the scent of wildflowers and sage, the same scent that had perfumed that first meeting so many years ago. And if you listened carefully, in the whisper of wind through the grass, you could almost hear laughter, the sound of 2 souls finally reunited, their love story complete but never ending. The town of Clifton Hill continued to grow and change, but the story remained constant. Whenever someone spoke of true love, of patience and kindness and healing, they spoke of Dalton and Valerie. The mail-order bride who arrived with scars she would not explain, and the patient cowboy who never asked, only loved. Their story was proof that broken things could be made whole, that love could heal the deepest wounds, and that sometimes the greatest romances were built not on passion alone, but on patience, understanding, and the daily choice to show up and love well. And so their legacy lived on, in the children and grandchildren who carried their names and their values, in the ranch that still stood strong, in the community they had helped build, and in the hearts of everyone who heard their story and believed, even for a moment, that love really could conquer all.